Well, hey everybody, we're so excited that you got to be here with us for our very first Zoom service. Now we realize this is totally different and you're having to do this for all your classes and all of those things. But we're so happy that you've gotten to join us tonight. We realize that this is different and this season has brought about lots of different things. And we thought it was time maybe to try something different, to connect with people on a different platform here. And, we're in the middle of a series where we are navigating and picking through some of the things from the Bible that Jesus said, and maybe some of the things that we think that Jesus said that he actually didn't say. I know this season has been one that has brought about a lot of changes for all of us. And, with those changes, I don't know about you, but for me, those have come with some pretty significant feelings. And for some of us, they're disappointment, some may be frustrated. Some people may have even gotten to the point where you're just kind of angry about the whole situation. No matter how you've been feeling, each of us has to accept the idea that life, it's not the same as it was before. And there is a chance that in some ways, some things may never go back to exactly the way they were before this coronavirus hit. I know there's some of us who are feeling the sting of things being canceled. You maybe were hoping to try to win a scholarship for the sport that you play, but because the season got canceled, you're not really sure what that's going to look like. Or there are lots of you I know who are graduating who are sad that you're not going to get to have your lasts of high school, your last official day, your last lunch in the cafeteria, your last hangout in the parking lot. And for lots of people, I know you're not even sure what graduation is going to look like. I mean, you've spent 12 years working to this point and maybe don't even get to have a graduation. And I know that can be really sad and kind of frustrating. And then I know there's other people on this call tonight who, maybe what's going on in your house is kind of unsettling, and you may be carrying the stress of what it looks like for your family financially. I know there's people on this call tonight whose parents have either lost their jobs or they're not working for a season. And with all of those things, it can be stressful. It can be hard. It can be difficult to know how to handle them. And sometimes, during this time, and when hard things happen, it can be really difficult to know how to respond. For some of us who are Christians, there may even be some guilt associated with this because we don't think we're supposed to feel a certain way. Tonight, I want to take some time and address those things and kind of be honest with you guys about where I have found myself a few times through the process of this quarantine. As a leader, it's important for me to be someone that you guys can look at and respect and understand. But I think that there are times when leaders are not always great at being vulnerable about the times where we have struggled or the things that maybe we're thinking or feeling in that time. And I'll just be honest with you guys tonight, there have been some times over the course of the last 7 weeks where I don't feel like I've been in a good place. I found myself in some times being sad or having a really short fuse, or just realizing I don't know, I'm just kind of frustrated. There's one day I think particularly that comes to mind where I woke up and nothing had changed, but I just felt really disconnected from things and my friends and the world. And I was still texting with people. I was still doing my work and those kinds of things. But I don't know, it seems like it all just kind of came together one day and I was just kind of down. I don't know, anybody feel me on this? Anybody understand what I'm talking about? I was just struggling. And the cool thing is that I started to recognize how I was feeling. And I didn't really like it. And it got me thinking a lot. We've never been through something like this. How are we supposed to process this? Is it okay to feel upset? Is it okay to feel sad? Because we've never been through something like this, I don't know how to process what I was thinking or feeling. But as I started to think, I kind of stumbled upon some of the things that Jesus said to his disciples. Now, the passage that we're going to use tonight, at the time that Jesus said these things, he was sitting around a table with his closest, most faithful friends, the guys who had been with him his entire ministry career, and they're hanging out. They had just had what we refer to as the Last Supper, kind of where we get our communion story from. And Jesus starts telling his friends all kinds of meaningful things. Jesus is trying to help them understand what's about to happen. He's literally telling them that pretty soon he's not going to be there with them. You can imagine their confusion because they're like, wait, you're right here with us. Like, what do you mean you're not going to be here anymore? And then in the middle of Jesus trying to prepare his friends that he's going to go, he says this. This is John 16, verse 33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Now, often when we read the Bible, we're looking for verses that tell us exactly what we want to hear. And there's plenty of those to be found. But I want you to know that when you read the Bible, there's so much more to be found and understood than what we see at face value. I believe that the Bible does have something to say for every situation of our lives, but it may not look like what we think. In this passage that we're talking about right here, there's some pretty heavy things happening. If you look through your Bible, like if you had your paper Bible here and you kind of scrolled through, for nearly 5 chapters, Jesus is speaking for the whole time. In my Bible, those are red letters, and you could see like for 5 chapters, Jesus is literally just talking to his friends. You know, there's this idea in Western Christianity that if we have Jesus in our lives, that things should be easy, that we shouldn't have pain. But the problem is that Jesus never promised us a pain-free life. Jesus never said, accept me and all your problems will magically disappear. What Jesus did say is that we will have trouble. Now, this trouble can look like all kinds of things. Jesus knew in this moment when he said this that he was about to go to his death. He was about to endure the most pain his physical body he had ever experienced. He knew that his heart would be broken by his friends abandoning him, and he understood that he was suffering. When he was suffering, he would look down into his mom's eyes and he would see her pain too. Jesus knew, though, despite all of that, that his death was necessary. He knew that his death would make way for the greatest movement in all of humanity to begin. He knew that his trouble would bring about the best possible outcome for his friends that he was sitting with. You see, the people that Jesus was talking to, that he was hanging out with, that he had just shared a meal with, and he had just washed their feet, he was literally sitting there encouraging him. These were the very people who would take his message and spread it around the world. They were the ones who would create the church by sharing the good news about who Jesus was. But Jesus also knew that for these guys, that was not going to be an easy task. He knew that they would face opposition like they could never imagine. Jesus knew that each of these men would face their own beatings, their own torture, and their own persecution. Man, did you know that all but one of the disciples was killed for their faith? And that one who didn't die, it's not because they didn't try to kill him, it's that he happened to live through it. When we read these words, we have to remember that Jesus didn't say, hey, in this life you're going to have trouble. I hope you can figure it out. Jesus doesn't leave us hanging. He gives us answers. No. He said this, in this life you will have trouble, but, and you know what? Oh man, that right there, that but leads to a promise. The idea of there's something else. And Jesus says this, take heart. I have overcome the world. Jesus tells us that our pain is not the end. We may feel pain, but it's not what defines us. It's not what holds you down. It's not what makes you who you are, because Jesus says, I have overcome the world. Let's bring this around full circle. Let's talk about what this means for us. How does this impact our lives today? Right now, we have disappointment. There are things that we're missing out on. You may have pain. You may be frustrated about not being able to leave your house. There's some of us who may feel pretty anxious about the world opening back up, and you may feel nervous for your family that they could be susceptible or at risk for COVID-19. And, I'd be honest with you today that if I ignored those feelings, if I just said, it's okay, I would be doing a disservice to you if I just dismissed those things. At 912, you probably heard us talk a lot about feelings, and while we cannot let feelings run our lives, they can help us gauge where we are. They're called feelings because we're meant to feel them. Our human nature is to avoid pain at all costs. And we assume wrongly that we are meant to be happy all the time. If that was the case, then there would only be one feeling and it would be good. But here's the thing, when we feel pain or sadness or depression or anxiety in our lives, it's an indication to us that something is going on inside of us that we need to address. And let me just say that, feeling your feelings and understanding them and working through them and wallowing around in them and allowing them to make us who we are, those are two different things. As we wrap up today, I want to give you 4 simple ideas, 4 simple ways that we can apply Jesus' words to our lives today. And when it comes to this idea that we will have trouble in life, often how we view the situation will determine the way that we approach our lives. How we view the situation that we are in determines how we approach life, because our mindset matters. The things that we think about, those things matter. So knowing that we will have trouble, knowing that Jesus told us life is not always going to be easy for you, how do we handle this? Well, here's the first thing. Number 1, remember that this world was never intended to be our home. Life on earth was never intended to be the end-all be-all. God has a future for us, and it's not just what happens here on earth. In Philippians chapter 3, verses 20 and 21, the Apostle Paul writes these words, "But our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ, who by the power that enables him to bring everything under his control will transform our lowly bodies so they will be like his glorious body." Guys, what we do now here on this earth paves the way for the lives that we get to have in heaven with God. And if we get so wrapped up in what happens here, we can lose sight of the fact that what really matters is our eternity with God. The second thing we can do to kind of get a hold of this is to not let your thoughts run wild. Guys, don't let your thoughts run wild. On the day that I found myself really struggling, I did some things that I think were really helpful for me. And one of those was listening to some podcasts. And I heard someone say something that it's not like it's a new idea. It's not like I'd never heard it before, but it hit me in a different way this day. And she said, not every thought that you have is true. Did you hear that? I'm going to say it again for those of you in the back. Not every thought that you have is true. Sometimes we think that because a thought pops into our brain, that must be something that we need to dwell on or something that we need to think about or that we need to take seriously. But guys, the thoughts that pop into our brain can come from all kinds of places. It can come from the things that you've been talking about. It can come from what you had for dinner. It can come from the shows that we watch. Not every thought that you have is true. And one of my favorite verses, one of the things that has helped me the most in understanding this idea comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. And it says, "We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." Take captive every thought. This, guys, this is the process of recognizing your thoughts, acknowledging the impact that they have, and not allowing them to run your life. Taking captive every thought is something that, you may think, okay, well, that sounds great. Sounds like a great idea. I have no idea how to do that. It starts with understanding the thoughts that pop into our brains and to say, you know what, I don't have to choose to think about this. I think it's also important in this idea here to remember that God created you to be a whole person. And sometimes the things that we think about, the ways that we're feeling in our emotions, those can have a play out in our body. Those can have an impact in the way that our bodies work. And God never intended to separate your mind from your heart, from your feelings, from your body. You're a whole person, and they go together on purpose. But here's the thing. Right before Jesus tells us in this John chapter here, John chapter 16, right before Jesus tells us that we will have trouble, he actually gives us the answer. It says, "In me you will have peace." In Jesus is peace. But sometimes I'm afraid that we confuse peace with this idea that everything is going to go right. That's not what peace is. Peace is understanding that you can have confidence and comfort in the middle of storms, in the middle of trouble, that Jesus is with us and that he has overcome those things. The third thing we can do to work through this is to learn to deal with disappointment. Learning to deal with disappointment is a really difficult thing, because I think sometimes we've heard like, well, just let it go, or just don't do this, don't do that. And in some ways, we need to acknowledge the sting that we're feeling. We need to acknowledge the frustration that we have. Did you know that there's a whole book in the Bible completely devoted to this? The book of Lamentations in the Old Testament, it's full of cries of sadness and almost like depression. And I think part of the reason that this book is there in the Bible is to remind us that it's okay to be disappointed, that it's okay to feel sad. But because Jesus has overcome the world, that means that he's overcome all the things that could make us sad. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it has some really good nuggets of truth for us as we kind of process through this season of being quarantined and being stuck at home. It says this, starting at verse 1. There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Maybe the Bible is giving us a clue here about this quarantine. Refrain from embracing. You know, there's a bunch more things there, a bunch more truth for us to understand. But the thing is, not every season of our lives is going to be happy. And not every season of our lives is going to be full of pain. Sometimes they're intermeshed, and sometimes it seems like things are really difficult and it's one thing after another after another. But remember that God gave us the answer in Jesus, that Jesus has overcome every single thing that we could think of. Lastly, the thing I want to tell you guys tonight is that you are not alone. Number 4 is you are not alone. Listen, I could sit here all night and talk to you about this. This could be a talk in itself, just about what it means to be in community and what it means to allow other people into your life. Even though you may feel alone because you're stuck inside and maybe you haven't left your house in 7 weeks and the only people that you're seeing are your family, you are not alone. I know that physically you may not have other people present in your life, but I need you to understand this. You are not alone. There are people who care for you. And for me, on that day when I found myself really struggling, one of the things that I did that I realized really helped me was to reach out to people. I have good friends. And as soon as I texted them and said, guys, I'm just not doing very good today, I'm kind of struggling, I'm feeling disconnected, immediately I had 4 text messages right back from those people who said, I'm here for you, I understand what you're saying, and I'm praying. And just knowing that I wasn't actually alone made me feel so much better. Made me understand that I'm not by myself. And I realized that one of the ways that Satan wants to get at us the most, one of the ways that he wants to kind of pick at us the most is through isolation. Because if we're by ourselves and we're only stuck in our own thoughts, then we can allow ourselves to jump to conclusions that maybe aren't true. So please remember this, you are not alone. And if nobody else has told you this today, I'm here for you. I am here for you, and Pastor Luke is here for you, and our small group leaders are here for you, but sometimes it takes us taking the responsibility on ourselves to say, I need to let somebody know how I'm feeling. I need to let somebody know what I've been thinking and allow some other truth to be spoken into your life. So guys, I want you to understand this. John 16:33, it says, you will have trouble, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Jesus has overcome anything that's going on in our lives.